Hello, this is Gyre Viper. I am on the phone with Bill Merklein, former Hasbro sculptist. He's going to be talking a bit about the Rocky Balboa concept and sculpt. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Hi, Gary. Great to hear from you again. How is it going?
It's going pretty good.
Good. Well, your question about the Rocky figure goes back quite a number of years, so I'll do my best to recall. But as I recall, at that time, we had started to do celebrity figures, and the first one that I got was Sergeant Slaughter, and that was followed by William Refrigerator Perry, who was a very popular, football player at the time. So as I recall, these were premium figures that you had to send away to Hasbro for. Now, the Rocky figure came in, and I believe my art director at that time was Roger Avery. And it seemed like a fun project to do. And we proceeded with this thing as a normal sculpt, and of course there was a portrait head to be done. And I believe on the research for the portrait head, I had to get research on my own, which meant watching videos and trying to pick up stills where I could. I just don't remember that Hasbro provided much in the way of research. But as with all my figures at that time, all my sculpts, was that there would be an engineering buck, and that was the terminology that Hasbro used, the word buck. I would call it an armature. And these armatures are basically parts that include the articulated joints that we had to sculpt around. So they always the same set of engineering parts were used. And the portrait part of it, the way that I would do this when I had to do a portrait, was first to do a bust of the figure. Now I should explain the bust of the figure was also the same head that was going to be used in the GI Joe figure, but for me it was just easier to sculpt it with the neck going into a torso for control. That way I could handle the figure in the left hand by having something to hold on to with the chest part of it. And the figure was sculpted to resemble Sylvester Stallone, which I think we did a pretty good job on. And fortunately, Stallone had, at that time, and I think he still has, a very distinctive set of features. And that's wonderful for a sculptor because portraiture is really about caricature. And good caricature, you've got to have a pretty strong head to start with, and Stallone certainly had one then, and I believe he still has one today. Just, God, I just think about this, that he and I are very close to the same age, which is well beyond doing any Rambo or Rocky films. So the figure, as I recall, we did him with boxing gloves as his weapon, and oddly enough, the head was finished off with a headband, like a tied headband, the kind of thing that you would see not on Rocky, but you would see it on Rambo. So the figure represented two of Stallone's characters. But my understanding as to why the figure never saw the light of day for the public was that there was a dispute between the licensing handler for Sylvester Stallone and the Rocky figure and the company, in as much as they wanted more in the way of a royalty than Hasbro was willing to pay. So the figure was dropped, and it was altered, I guess, up in Pawtucket. I did not deal with that. I was not asked to alter the figure, but a new head was sculpted for it. And I think some things were done to the body, as I remember, an X strap that went across the body of this character that you might remember, Gary. I think it was it Big Boa?
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, that was the original intention, was to do Sylvester Stallone. It just came out as Big Boa. So do you have any specific questions?
Um, I guess a lot of the questions, or I guess the one question a lot of people have is why do you think they didn't opt for Rambo before Rocky? But I don't know if how much Rocky predates Rambo cinema wise, so that might answer that question. And obviously, he wouldn't make quite the role model for kids, but I mean, they're already dealing with guns and knives, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't on that end of it, of course. I was just a hired hand. But certainly both films were done before the figure was done. I mean, Rocky was first, and of course, First Blood came later. But both had been out there before the Rocky figure was created, and it just might have been that Hasbro had decided that Rocky would be the better licensing character for their series. This was a more sensitive time in toy making than we have today. And as an example, a toy line would not be produced, an action line series would not be produced for a film that received an R rating. And therefore, I don't know, you'd have to look back in film history to see if Rambo or First Blood had received an R rating. The toy companies were extremely sensitive about that because they presumed that the market for the Rocky figure and all the G.I. Joes would be for an age that would not be permitted to see an R-rated film. So that might have been a part of their logic, their thinking. But I'm merely guessing at this point.
Yeah. What they're doing now for the latest line is they're taking just influences from 80s movies like Predator and infusing that into the characters to give them, a nod of, nostalgia, but also, I guess, somewhat of an edge. Like, have you ever seen Predator?
Oh, yes.
You know the character Billy, the Native American?
From the original movie?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember him.
Yeah, they've infused him with spirit, so it looks like Billy from Predator, but it's spirit. So it's somewhat similar to taking a celebrity. They're just taking a different approach, obviously, to avoid paying royalties and whatnot, I guess.
Yeah, so in other words, they're making a neutral figure that reminds you of the original character, but is not the original character.
Yeah.
Part of this has to do with something that's come along in the last 20 years in a very strong way, and that has to do with intellectual property lawyers. And I'll give you a short story. I had, besides working for Hasbro, I've worked for many other toy companies and also some garage kit companies. And I did an Alien kit for Dark Horse Comics years ago, and it was based upon the third Alien film, which was not very highly respected. But the model was, I'm happy to say, that the work that I did for it. This got me to work with Randy Bowen, who at that time was the art director for Dark Horse out, I think, in Seattle. So we talked a lot on the phone. But I saw him one day at a show in Washington, D.C., and he had sculpted a wonderful figure of Frankenstein from The Bride of Frankenstein, where Frankenstein was chained to a throne. If you remember the film, you'll remember that particular scene in the film. And I commented to Randy that he had done a really good job on the sculpt, but it didn't look like Boris Karloff. And he explained this to me, and that was astounding. That, of course, working with Universal, Dark Horse was paying a royalty for the use of Frankenstein from Bride of Frankenstein. But on top of that, the Karloff family wanted a separate royalty based upon the likeness of Boris Karloff. And so they had opted that they could not afford to pay but one set of royalties. This I found very bizarre because you figure, well, Boris Karloff was an actor who was paid to play the part of